My pregnant sister fucked my boyfriend while I was working 3 jobs to support our dying father. The revenge I planned at her gender reveal party left her homeless and him in handcuffs. My name is Marissa Caldwell. I'm 28, and I didn't write that title to be cute or dramatic. I wrote it because if I start this story the normal way, my boyfriend cheated, people won't understand the scale of what they did, or how long they did it, or how hard I worked to keep my family alive while they used my life like a joke. 2 years ago, my dad, Lionel Caldwell, started shrinking in front of me. At first, it was little stuff, skipping meals because nothing tasted right, sleeping through the afternoon, brushing off pain with, "I'm fine, kiddo." Then he started forgetting bills he used to pay on autopilot, and he'd stare at the TV like he couldn't follow what people were saying. When he finally let me take him to the hospital, we got the kind of news that changes the temperature of the room. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Fast, aggressive, not a fight it and beat it situation, more like make him comfortable, spend your time, prepare. I moved back into my childhood home that week. I told my landlord I was leaving, I stuffed my life into boxes, and I came home because somebody had to. My mom had been gone for years, and it was just me and my little sister, Callie. Callie was 24, pregnant, and unbelievably good at being helpless in a way that made other people jump in to rescue her. She'd put her hands on her belly and say she couldn't handle stress for the baby, and the whole room would rearrange itself around her. Meanwhile, Dad was the one actually dying. So I became the person who did everything. I worked 3 jobs, mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons as a receptionist at a small dental office, and nights doing deliveries until my feet burned. In between shifts, I drove Dad to appointments, argued with insurance, picked up prescriptions, cleaned the house, made meals he barely touched, and learned the kind of caregiving tasks nobody talks about until you're doing them, like how to change sheets without making your father feel humiliated, or how to keep your voice steady when he asks if he's going to die soon. Bills stacked up anyway. Cancer doesn't care how hard you work. Hospice forms looked like legal documents designed to crush hope. Every covered service came with something that wasn't covered, and every month had at least one moment where I sat in my car and tried to figure out which payment I could delay without the whole system collapsing. The only bright spot I thought I had was my boyfriend, Brandon Hayes. Brandon was 30 and had that clean-cut, dependable vibe that makes neighbors trust him. He was the kind of guy who held doors, remembered birthdays, and knew how to speak calmly when everyone else was spiraling. When Dad got diagnosed, Brandon showed up more. He brought soup, fixed the loose porch railing, mowed the lawn without being asked, and told me, "You're not doing this alone." I needed to believe him. I needed something in my life that wasn't falling apart. Callie loved Brandon too, or at least that's what I thought it was. She'd laugh too loud at his jokes, touch his arm when she talked, and call him basically family. Sometimes I noticed the way she looked at him, and I'd immediately scold myself for being suspicious, because who suspects their own sister while their father is dying? Plus, Callie had her own on and off boyfriend, Trevor Lang, who was supposedly the father of her baby. Trevor was between jobs, always working on something, always showing up long enough for a selfie with Callie's bump, and then disappearing the second anything got difficult. By the time Callie hit her second trimester, taking a break was just the nicer way of saying he'd checked out. So, when Brandon started helping Callie more, driving her to prenatal appointments when I couldn't get off work, picking up her cravings, sitting with her on the couch while she cried about Trevor, I told myself it was normal. I told myself it was what a decent guy did when his girlfriend's family was in crisis. I was so focused on being useful that I didn't notice I was becoming invisible. Caretaking does that to you. People stop asking how you are because the answer is always tired. They stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a function, the daughter who handles it, the sister who pays, the girlfriend who will understand if plans get canceled and texts go unanswered. I didn't realize Brandon and Callie weren't just helping each other. They were building something behind my back. One night, after a double shift and a delivery run that ended with a drunk customer yelling at me because his fries were cold, I came home to see Brandon's car in the driveway. The porch light was on. Through the living room window, I saw him on the couch. Not with my dad. with Callie. She was tucked into the corner, hand resting on her belly like she was posing for a maternity shoot, and Brandon was leaning in, close enough that my brain tried to reject it. It wasn't explicitly sexual, it was worse than that. It was intimate. When I stepped inside, they both moved too fast, like teenagers caught doing something they shouldn't. Brandon stood up immediately. "Hey babe, long day?" Callie overdid the cheerfulness. "Marissa, you look exhausted. We were just talking about the gender reveal." "The what?" I asked. Callie's face lit up. "I want a real party," she said. "Something big. Dad deserves something happy in this house for once. And I deserve to celebrate, you know?" I thought about the hospice deposit on the table, the overdue utility bill tucked under Dad's pill organizer, and the fact that I hadn't bought myself new shoes in a year because every extra dollar went to keeping this family afloat. But I looked at Dad's room and I remembered how he used to throw us little birthday parties when money was tight, and I decided I didn't have the energy to fight about joy. Brandon squeezed my hand. He said softly, "It could be good for your dad." That phrase, "for your dad," was a key they both learned to use on me. It unlocked my guilt every time. So I nodded. "Okay, we'll do it." I didn't know I'd just agreed to the stage where they'd destroy me, or where I'd decide quietly to destroy them back. The next few weeks blurred into the kind of routine that makes you feel like your life is happening somewhere else. Dad's bad days outnumbered the good. Callie's gender reveal became her full-time hobby. She wanted balloon arches, custom cupcakes, matching shirts, and a rented smoke cannon like the TikToks. I kept saying we should keep it small because Dad gets tired easily, and our living room wasn't exactly an event venue. Callie pouted. Then Brandon would step in like he was Switzerland and say that he and Callie would handle most of it so I wouldn't stress. That should have been the first real clue, how naturally they spoke like a team. Then the money started bleeding out of my account. One Saturday morning, I sat at the kitchen table with bills spread out like a losing hand. Dad needed a medication the insurance didn't fully cover, and the pharmacy tech had said the words I hated most: out of pocket. I logged into my account and felt my throat tighten. There were charges I didn't recognize: an event supply store across town, a bakery I'd never visited, and a party rental company. For half a second, I felt relief, because fraud would have meant it wasn't personal. Then I clicked into one of the receipts. The pickup name was Brandon's. My card wasn't something Brandon and I shared. We didn't live together. We didn't have joint accounts. The only way he had my card info was if he'd gotten it from my laptop or from somewhere he had no right to access. When I confronted him that night, I tried to keep it about the charges, not about the weird vibe, not about the way my gut had started screaming whenever he and Callie were in the same room. Brandon didn't even blink. He slid into calm mode like it was instinct. "Oh yeah," he said, "Callie asked me to put a few things together for the party. I didn't realize it ran through your card." "How did it even get to my card?" I asked, holding my phone up like proof. He frowned like I was asking him to do a hard math problem. "Maybe it autofilled. I used your laptop that one time to print the hospice forms, remember?" I did remember. The printer jammed and he'd offered to help while I was bathing Dad. I'd been grateful because at that point I was grateful for anything. "So you used my laptop, saved my card info, and bought party supplies," I said. He lifted his hands. "I didn't save it on purpose. I was going to tell you. I just didn't want to add more stress. I figured you'd want the party to be nice for your dad." Right then, Callie waddled into the kitchen with a bowl of cereal like she was floating through life. She listened for 10 seconds and sighed dramatically. "Marissa," she said, "are you seriously mad about the party? It's not like you're going to take the money with you when Dad—" She stopped herself, but the sentence stayed in the air, ugly and unfinished. Callie shot her a look that felt too practiced, like they'd trained each other on damage control. Callie's expression softened immediately, and she patted her belly. "I just mean, Dad deserves joy, and you've been so intense lately." I wanted to scream, but Dad coughed down the hall, and I refused to let him hear us tearing each other apart. "Fine," I said, jaw tight. "Not doing this right now." I walked away and told myself I was choosing peace. It wasn't peace, it was delay. That night, I couldn't sleep. At around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check his iPad. No name, no explanation, just that. My heart started pounding like my body already knew the truth and my mind was catching up. Brandon had an older iPad he sometimes left at my place because he used it to stream shows while he kept Dad company. It was sitting in the living room, charging on the side table. My first instinct was to wake Callie and demand answers. My second instinct was to call Brandon and ask what was going on. But a third instinct, quiet, sharp, and new, told me to shut up and look. I walked into the living room barefoot, moving like I was afraid the floorboards would rat me out. The screen lit up when I touched it. No passcode. I opened the Messages app, telling myself I was only checking to see if he'd done something shady with my card. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the iPad. The thread at the top made my stomach turn. Callie's name with a heart icon. I scrolled. At first, it was jokes and flirty check-ins. Then it became compliments that weren't sisterly. Then it became plans that lined up with my work schedule. Callie, Marissa won't be home until late. Dad's asleep. Brandon, I'll be there. Then I saw the line that cracked something open in my chest. Callie, sometimes I feel guilty, but then I remember she doesn't even notice you anymore. Brandon, she's too busy playing hero. Let her. I kept scrolling like I was digging my own grave on purpose. There were inside jokes about me being predictable, complaints about my martyr act, and little casual confirmations that they'd been doing this for a while. And then I found a photo. Not graphic, but unmistakable. Brandon's hand on Callie's thigh, on my couch, with my dad's hallway visible in the background like a cruel punchline. I covered my mouth so I wouldn't make a sound. The humiliation hit first, before the rage, the kind that makes you feel reduced to a paycheck and a chore list. I sat on the rug in front of the couch, breathing so quietly it hurt, while my mind tried to rearrange reality into something less disgusting. Then something in me shut off, because confronting them right away would have played into exactly what they wanted. Callie would cry about stress hurting the baby. Brandon would talk me down and act like the reasonable one. They'd deny, minimize, and twist until I looked unstable for even suggesting it. They'd make me the villain for reacting to their betrayal. So I didn't confront them. I took screenshots of everything. I emailed them to myself. I photographed the iPad screen in case they later claimed I faked it. I checked the synced calendar and found blocks of time labeled with code words, Costco, appointment, drop off, that matched my shifts. This wasn't a mistake. It was a routine. I put the iPad back exactly where it was, wiped it down, and walked back to my bedroom like I was made of glass. The next morning, I made Dad breakfast, helped him sit up, and listened to him tell me, softly, ashamed, that he hated being a burden. I held his hand and told him he wasn't. I didn't mention Callie. I didn't mention Brandon. But in my head, the story had changed. This wasn't a breakup. This was an investigation. Over the next week, I started documenting everything. I moved my wallet and took photos of where I placed it. I turned on transaction alerts for my cards, froze my credit, and changed every password Brandon might have ever seen me type. I quietly checked my cash envelope for Dad's copays and watched it come up short by $120 after Callie had been the only one in the kitchen. I didn't accuse her. I wrote it down. Then I bought 2 small indoor security cameras, nothing fancy, and placed them in the common areas of the house where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy. One faced the front door, one covered the living room and the start of the hallway. I told myself it was to keep an eye on Dad at night if he tried to get up. That wasn't a lie, it just wasn't the whole truth. Within 2 days, I had footage of Brandon letting himself into the house with the key I hadn't realized he still had. I had footage of him walking straight past Dad's room and meeting Callie in the kitchen like they'd planned it. Their hug lasted long enough that no one could call it innocent. I still needed one more thing, a written admission tied to the money, something that wouldn't depend on interpretation or "you're taking it wrong." Brandon handed it to me because he was getting cocky. As the party got closer, Brandon stopped pretending he was helping for me and started acting like I owed him for showing up at all. One night, I came home soaked from rain and found him eating the last of Dad's soup, the portion I'd labeled for the next day because Dad could only handle small amounts. "That was for my father," I said. Brandon shrugged. "Make more tomorrow. He barely eats anyway." In the hallway, I heard Callie laugh like it was a private joke. That's when I understood it wasn't just sex. It was contempt. A few days later, Brandon started pushing me to just put the rest on your card, promising he'd pay me back when a bonus hit. When I reminded him he'd already used my card without permission, he rolled his eyes like I was nagging him about laundry. "You're acting like I robbed a bank," he snapped. "It was for your family." Callie didn't even look up from her phone. "Honestly, Mariffa, if you weren't so controlling, you'd have people helping you more." I forced my face into neutral because I could feel Brandon watching me like he was trying to figure out whether I knew. Then he softened his voice and tried the guilt angle. "You've been distant, like you don't even want me around." I made my voice small on purpose. "I'm overwhelmed." His shoulders loosened. "Then let us take some weight off you." Us. He said it like it was normal. That night, I texted him with careful wording like I was setting a snare. "I'm still upset about those charges. I need you to tell me exactly what you bought with my card and when. I'm trying to make sure it doesn't happen again." He replied almost immediately. "Babe, I told you. I used your card for the party stuff. Balloons, cake deposit, rental. Callie asked me to. I didn't think you'd freak out. I'll pay you back after the reveal." There it was, a written admission. I took screenshots and backed them up in 3 places. Then I baited him a little more. "Okay," I texted. "How much did you charge total? I need a number for my budget." He wrote, "Around $1,800, maybe $2,000 with the deposits." That was rent money. That was medication money. That was the difference between comfort and panic while my father was dying. The next day on my lunch break, I went to the police station. I didn't go in crying. I didn't go in talking about cheating. I went in with printed statements, screenshots, and a timeline. I need to file a report for unauthorized use of my card. I have proof in writing. They took it seriously. The evidence was clear, the amount was real, and my calm probably helped because I wasn't presenting it like a messy relationship fight. I gave them Brandon's information and asked a practical question. If I choose the timing, can an officer be present when I end things? Like a standby, I don't feel safe. They explained what they could and couldn't do and how a civil standby request works depending on staffing. I left with the case number, a sick feeling in my stomach, and one clear thought. Now I had consequences that didn't depend on anyone's opinion of me. Now I needed the room. Callie kept pushing the gender reveal date, insisting it needed to happen soon before Dad gets worse. She said it sweetly, but I watched the way she looked at him afterward, like she was measuring his decline, and it made my skin crawl. I agreed to the date she wanted. Then I offered, casually, we should do a slideshow, like a memory thing for Dad first, something emotional. Then we do your countdown and the reveal. Callie loved the idea immediately because it made her look like a devoted daughter. "Yes, and you're good at that stuff," she said. "You can handle it." That was the moment the trap became real because now I controlled the screen. I built 2 slideshows. One was what Callie expected, baby photos, family pictures, a sweet boy or girl countdown, and clips of Dad smiling from better days. The other was saved under a nearly identical name, tucked into a folder she'd never click. It started harmless, then turned into a slow, undeniable walk through the truth, screenshots, admissions, timestamps, and footage. I also made sure the right people would be there. I invited my dad's closest church friend, Gerald Monroe, because he was steady and no nonsense. I asked my coworkers Sienna Park to come early and stick close to me, no questions asked. I made sure Trevor would show up by texting him directly instead of relying on Callie to pass it along. Gender reveal is Saturday at 3, I wrote. Dad's health is declining. If you want to show up for your kid, this is the time. Trevor responded, I'll be there. The week of the party, Brandon and Callie were practically glowing. They walked around my house like they owned it. Brandon called Callie Mama as a joke right in front of me, then smirked when I forced a laugh. Callie left her bedroom door cracked when Brandon was over, like she wanted me to notice and feel crazy for noticing. And I let them, because comfort makes people careless, and they were drunk on how untouchable they felt. The night before the gender reveal, I sat beside Dad's bed while he slept, listening to his breathing the way I'd learned to do. I held his hand and whispered, I'm going to fix this. Then I walked into the living room and looked at the projector set up against the wall. The stage was ready. The day of the gender reveal, I woke up before my alarm and just listened to the house. The heater kicked on, the fridge hummed. Down the hall, Callie's laughter floated out of her room, bright and excited, like we weren't living in a house full of medical supplies and grief. I got Dad dressed in his nicest button-down, the one he saved for church. It hung loose on him now, but when I buttoned it up, he gave me a faint smile and said, You always take care of us, kiddo. That almost broke me. I kissed his cheek and told him, Today's going to be fine, even though my whole body felt like it was holding its breath. By noon, the backyard looked like a pastel explosion. Balloon arches, dessert table, a white sheet hung against the fence for the projector. Callie moved around like an event planner, directing people and adjusting decorations while posing for photos. Brandon showed up carrying smoke cannons like he was the hero of the day. He kissed my cheek and whispered, See, you worried for nothing. I smiled. Yeah, thanks for helping. People arrived in waves. Dad's church friends, cousins, neighbors, Callie's coworkers. Trevor showed up wearing too much cologne and that stiff, I'm here, aren't I attitude. Callie squealed when she saw him and hugged him for the optics. Trevor's eyes flicked to me like he wanted to ask why I texted him directly, but then Callie pulled him into a photo and he got distracted. I stayed near Dad the whole time. Gerald sat beside him, quiet and watchful. Sienna hovered a few steps behind me, and if anyone asked, she was helping me manage food and guests. No one asked. Callie clinked a spoon at a glass. Okay, everyone, gather round. We're doing the slideshow first because I want to honor my dad for being here. He's my rock. People clapped and looked at Dad. Dad lifted a weak hand, embarrassed, but touched. I felt my jaw tighten because Callie hadn't been his rock, but I kept my face calm. Callie continued, Then we'll do the countdown and the big reveal. I walked to the laptop and said, All right, starting it now. The first slideshow played exactly as promised. Baby photos of Callie, family pictures from better years, a couple video clips of Dad smiling before pain turned every expression into effort. People went, Aww. Callie dabbed fake tears and leaned into Trevor. Brandon stood behind her with a hand hovering at the small of her back, like he belonged there. Then the screen went black. Callie frowned. Wait, did it end? There should be the countdown. I kept my hand on the mouse. There's one more. The next slide appeared, a screenshot of Brandon's message thread with Callie, her name at the top, heart icon next to it. The yard didn't just go quiet, it tightened. Callie's smile froze. Brandon's face drained so fast it looked like someone pulled the plug. On the screen, big enough for everyone to read, was Brandon's message. She's too busy playing hero. Let her. A woman near the dessert table whispered, Oh my God. Callie laughed once, high and shaky. Marissa, what is this? Is this a joke? I clicked to the next slide. Brandon's text admitting he used my card, that Callie asked him to. Then the amount, around $1,800, maybe $2,000. Murmurs broke out immediately. Gerald Monroe leaned forward and said, loud enough for people nearby to hear, That's theft. Brandon took a step toward me. Turn that off. I didn't look at him. I clicked again. The projector switched to a short clip from my living room camera. Brandon letting himself into my house with a key, walking past my father's room and meeting Callie in the kitchen. Their hug was long and familiar. Then they disappeared down the hall while Dad slept. Callie's face twisted into outrage. "You put cameras in the house?" she snapped. "I put cameras in the common areas," I said evenly, "because my father is dying and people were coming in and out without telling me." Brandon barked. "That's illegal." Gerald cut in, voice like a gavel. "No, it isn't if it's her home and it's not in a private space." Trevor stepped forward, confusion turning to anger. "Callie," he said, "what the hell is this?" Callie whipped her head around, eyes wet on command. "It's not what it looks like. She's twisting it because she's jealous. She hates that I'm pregnant and she's—" I clicked to the final image. The photo from Brandon's iPad, his hands on Callie's thigh on my couch with Dad's hallway in the background. Not explicit, but intimate enough that the lie had nowhere left to hide. The backyard recoiled. Trevor's face changed into something I won't forget. Shock, humiliation, rage, all fighting for first place. "So while I'm trying to show up, you're sleeping with him?" he said, voice low. Callie reached for him. "Trevor, listen." Trevor jerked away. "Don't touch me." Brandon tried to switch tactics, going soft. "Marissa, please, we can talk inside. You're doing this in front of everyone." "That was the point," I said. Callie turned to the crowd, clutching her belly like a shield. "I'm pregnant. She's doing this to hurt my baby." A few people shifted uncomfortably, but no one stepped in to save her. They'd already seen too much. Behind me, Dad made a sound, small and wrecked. I turned and saw tears on his face. He looked like a man whose heart finally accepted what his brain had been refusing to process. "Callie," Dad whispered, "why?" For 1 second, Callie looked scared, because Dad's disappointment was the one thing she couldn't charm away. Then she did what she always did when cornered. She blamed me. "It's because Marissa treats everyone like employees. She thinks because she pays for everything, she owns us. She doesn't even love him. She just loves being the martyr." I nodded slowly, letting her finish. Brandon snapped back into anger. "This is your fault," he hissed at me. "You've been cold for months. All you care about is your dad and money and paying for the life you were stealing," I said. Then right on schedule, I heard a voice at the side gate. "Ma'am?" 2 uniformed officers stood there, and Sienna was with them. She gave me a tiny nod. Brandon saw the uniforms and went rigid. One officer asked, "Are you Marissa Caldwell?" "Yes," I said. "I filed a report for unauthorized use of my card. I requested a standby because I'm ending this relationship and I don't feel safe." Brandon stared at me like I'd turned into a stranger. "You called the cops?" he whispered, like he couldn't believe I'd picked reality over his image. I angled the laptop so the officer could see the admission text and the charges. The officer's expression tightened. "Mr. Brandon Hayes, do you have identification on you?" Brandon tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. "This is insane. She's doing this because she's mad." "Sir," the officer said, firmer, "identification." Brandon reached for his pocket. The second officer stepped closer, watching him carefully. Callie started crying again. "Marissa, stop. You're going to get him arrested at my gender reveal in front of my baby's father." I looked her in the eyes. "You should have thought about that before you had sex with my boyfriend in my house while my father was dying in the next room." That sentence hit the yard like a slap. Someone gasped. Someone muttered, "Jesus." Trevor turned away like he might be sick. Brandon's shoulders slumped. After a brief exchange with the officers, they told him to turn around. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut didn't feel like victory. It felt like gravity. Callie made a strangled noise. "No, Brandon!" She moved toward him and stopped when the officer lifted a hand and told her to stay back. Brandon looked at me one last time, eyes wide with disbelief and fury. He didn't look sorry. He looked caught. As the officers guided him out through the gate, guests parted like the sea. Nobody cheered, nobody clapped. People just stared at the collapse of something they hadn't known they were standing inside. The moment Brandon was gone, Callie's tears vanished like a switch flipped. "You ruined me. Where am I supposed to go?" "I'm not going to let you stay here." Her eyes widened like the idea was insane. "This is Dad's house." "It's my home too," I said, "and I'm the one paying the bills. You've been stealing, lying, and using this place like a hotel." Callie lifted her chin. "So you're going to kick out your pregnant sister?" "Yes," I said. "I'm going to protect my father from the stress you bring into this house." Callie pivoted toward Dad, ready to use him. "Dad, tell her." Dad's voice was weak but steady. "Callie," he said, I can't do this." For the first time all day, she looked truly afraid. I pointed toward the front door. "Pack a bag, tonight. You can have someone with you if you want, but you're leaving." She stared at me like she wanted to hit me, then looked around and realized her audience was gone. Her coworkers wouldn't meet her eyes. Trevor stood by his car, jaw tight, not moving toward her. The cake sat untouched. The smoke cannons stayed in their box. The decorations fluttered in the breeze like they didn't know the party was dead. Callie stormed inside to pack, and the big moment she wanted still happened, just not the way she planned. In the quiet after, as people awkwardly started to leave, Gerald stayed by Dad. He asked if Dad wanted to go inside, and Dad nodded. I walked with them, holding my father's elbow like I'd done 1,000 times, except this time it felt like the house had been robbed of something you can't replace. Later that night, when everything was finally still, Sienna sat with me at the kitchen table while Dad slept. I asked her one question I'd been holding since 2 a.m. the night that text came in. "Did you send the message about the iPad?" Sienna hesitated, then nodded. She told me she'd come by earlier that week to drop off something I'd forgotten at work. When she pulled into the street, she saw Brandon's car already there, and she saw him let himself in like he lived with us. She waited a minute, then saw him come back outside to move his car closer, glancing around like he didn't want neighbors watching. "It felt off," she said. "I didn't want to accuse him out loud and be wrong, but I also didn't want you blind." So she texted me from a free texting app, anonymous, because she didn't want her number dragged into family drama if I wasn't ready. It was messy, but it was honest, and it was the nudge that kept me from letting them gaslight me into silence. 2 years have passed since that night. Dad didn't get a miracle recovery. He got what most people get. A few decent weeks, a lot of brutal days, and then a quiet ending that still didn't feel fair. He died about 3 months after the gender reveal, at home, with me holding his hand and Gerald praying softly in the corner. Callie didn't make it in time. I don't know if that was because she couldn't or because she couldn't face him after what she did. But I do know the last clear conversation I had with my dad, he apologized for putting so much on me. I told him he didn't. I told him I'd choose him again, and I meant it. After Dad passed, Callie tried to crawl back into my life like nothing was permanent. It started with, "We need to talk," like she still had authority. Then it became, "I'm sorry," with no specifics. Then it became, "I'm your sister," like biology erased consequences. When I didn't respond, she showed up at the house and cried on the porch until a neighbor told her to leave. I never opened the door. People love to say, "But she was pregnant," like pregnancy turns betrayal into a misunderstanding. I hope her child is safe. I hope her child grows up loved and stable. I also hope Callie learns that you don't get to burn someone's life down and then demand warmth from them when you're cold. Trevor didn't take her in. That surprised her more than anything I did on that projector screen. He told her he'd be involved with the baby, but he wasn't signing up for chaos and lies. They ended up in a tense, on and off co parenting situation, the kind where everything is documented because trust died a long time ago. Callie bounced between friends' couches for a while. Some people helped at first because everyone feels sympathy for a pregnant woman, but sympathy runs out when the pattern shows up: entitlement, blame, drama, and the expectation that everyone else should pay for her choices. So yes, homeless is the blunt word, even if it wasn't one continuous stretch on the street. Some nights she had a couch, some nights she didn't. She burned through the relatives who would have once rescued her because after what happened, people stopped believing her version of events. As for Brandon, the handcuffs weren't just for show. The unauthorized charges were real, documented, and backed by his own written admission. He tried to claim I gave permission, but the texts didn't read like permission. They read like confession. I'm not going to pretend I understand every legal detail or how every county handles these cases, but I do understand outcomes. He ended up charged, he took a plea deal, he paid restitution, and he still walked away with a record that followed him. His job didn't survive it, his nice guy mask didn't survive it either. Last I heard through the grapevine, he'd gotten arrested again later for violating terms tied to his case and spent time in county. It turns out the guy who thought stealing from his girlfriend was no big deal wasn't exactly built for accountability. And me? I'm not the same person I was when I was working 3 jobs and pretending I could hold a whole family together by force of will. After Dad died, I sold the house. I used part of the money to wipe out the medical debt that had been stalking me, and I used the rest to buy a smaller place where every object wasn't soaked in survival mode. I quit deliveries. I went full-time at the dental office, got certified for better pay, and slept through the nights for the first time in what felt like a decade. I also started therapy because revenge can be deserved and still leave bruises on your soul. I had to unlearn the idea that love means tolerating disrespect. I had to stop flinching every time my phone buzzed like it might be another disaster. About a year after everything, I met someone named Ethan Ramirez at a coworker's game night. He didn't swoop in like a savior. He didn't love bomb me. He didn't pressure me to forgive and forget because it would make my story easier to hear. He just showed up consistently. He listened without trying to edit my feelings. He treated my boundaries like they were normal instead of negotiable. We're married now. Sometimes I think about how close I was to staying quiet, swallowing the betrayal, and letting them keep treating me like the family workhorse while they laughed behind my back. If I had confronted them privately, they would have denied it, and I would have been framed as jealous, intense, controlling, whatever label kept the spotlight off their choices. Doing it publicly wasn't about humiliation for sport. It was about stopping them from rewriting history before it started. And if you're wondering whether I feel guilty that my sister ended up with nowhere to go, here's the truth I've earned the right to say. I didn't make Callie homeless. I made her accountable. She just didn't have the character to live without using someone. I miss my dad every day, but I don't miss the version of my life where love meant being a doormat while people wiped their shoes on me and called it family.